Fragrances based on world travel sound like an awesome idea, but do these scents actually live up? Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is Fragrance Speed Dating with Une Nuit Nomade. In this video format, I plow through my discovery sets and mountain of fragrance samples to really better understand houses, genres, and perfume in general. This is such a beautiful way to quickly go through a lot of samples, quickly go through a lot of scents, showcase many things to you, and just overall simulate the idea of walking into a shop and sampling a brand. It's really cool. You guys seem to like it, so I keep repeating myself just because I have a lot of discovery sets to show you and a lot of fun ones at that. The discovery set for this brand has been highly requested by you guys, and I even showcased the purchase, or rather the receiving of this very discovery set when I did my unboxing, maybe for the Papillon fragrances in early January. And since then, this discovery set has been basically sitting on my shelf unopened. I have not smelled anything from the discovery set. I have not touched the samples. I have actually never smelled anything from Une Nuit Nomade. Well, actually, that's a lie. I have smelled sugar leather because I had a travel atomizer of that a while back, many months ago. I kind of like that fragrance, but today I'll be sampling it again, especially on card. I have no idea what to expect. I have a vague memory of that. In any case, I know it sounds a little bit weird owning something like this and not sampling it, not having the curiosity or the drive of just sitting down and sampling it. But I'm very short on time, and I have many discovery sets, many fragrances, everything is coming and going, and pinning down 2 hours, especially in front of a camera, to go through the discovery set on a first impression is not always that easy. I really have to sort of like mix and match my content, not to make it too repetitive. And actually, I've been sitting on way too many discovery sets, so I might have to feature a little bit more fragrance speed dating than my usual reviews just to get through the discovery sets. In any case, I'm very excited to finally get my nose on the brand and finally sample Une Nuit Nomade. In today's sample set, we have 8 fragrances. We're going to be sampling Sugar Leather, some Bleached, Jardins de Misfah, Ambre Khandjar, Love at First Sight, Suma Oriental, Memory Motel, Nothing But Sea and Sky, Bohemian Soul, and Click Song. And by the way, the sample set is really well done. It's laid out beautifully. We have cards for each fragrance, and I'm going to be reading those just to get myself an idea of what the fragrance is about. The fragrances are beautifully laid out. The boxing, overall, the presentation of the sample set is amazing. I have to say that this sample set was actually quite reasonably priced. I think that for 8 fragrances, and they seem pretty large and very good samples, I think I paid about 55 euros or something like that, so not too bad. Overall, looks like an amazing product. About the Une Nuit Nomade in general, it's not a brand that I'm familiar with whatsoever. As I said, I have never smelled anything. I know that it's a fairly popular brand, it's fairly new, and it's all about world travels. It's all about the experience and the smells of traveling the world and just like having this memory association to these places. So it's a really cool topic. I really applaud the concept and idea, and I do think that easy to relate aspect and the easy to grasp aspect of this concept is one of the reasons why this brand has been so relatively popular in such a short relative amount of time. The fragrances are all fairly well known. If you look at the reviews on Parfum and Fragrantica, they have a lot of reviews, a lot of feedback, a lot of comments and interactions. And the fragrances in general seem to be relatively, again, liked. All this is to say that I'm a huge fan of simplicity, simple concepts, simple ideas, and just well-executed products. You can always scale up the complexity after that. And this is actually a stark difference from one of my last speed dating episodes where I featured the house of Thomas de Monaco. And despite the fragrances being really good, really high quality, and smelling just good in general, I couldn't relate to the house. There was no character. The house kind of came across as a little bit undecisive, a little bit nondescript, and they were kind of riding the line between being perfumey and a little bit artistic, and it was just very difficult to relate to the fragrances. They seemed all over the place. The extreme relatability of Une Nuit Nomade will probably make for a very fun, simple, easygoing sampling experience, perfect for this format, perfect for fragrance speed dating. But before we get to the actual sampling, let me just quickly recap how this format works. I'll be spraying these fragrances on strip, which is a stark difference from my usual doing. I tend to like to spray on skin just because I like how the skin personalizes and customizes fragrances. But when sampling a whole discovery set, when sampling multiple fragrances, it becomes a logistical nightmare. Not only it's super confusing, but you actually run out of skin real estate and just becomes a mess. After each sampling, I'll be assigning a score 1 to 10 to the very first opening, very first impressions of the fragrance. Again, mimicking the experience of going into a shop and sampling in the shop for the very first time. And if I sample the scent, I'll be looking at it in third-person mode, giving you my very first impressions, ignoring everything from the dry down. And again, this score 1 to 10 will only reflect the first impressions, keeping it very fragrance speed dating style. At the end, I'll be picking the fragrance that I like the most. I'll be spraying that on skin to see if it evolves a little bit from my strip impression, because some fragrances really evolve, some fragrances really change, some brands really require skin applications to fully be enjoyed. As I said before, the brand of Une Nuit Nomade has been founded relatively recently in 2013, and it's a brand focused on depicting the experience of world travel. It's a really cool concept, very, very simple, very relatable. And I think that originally this brand was actually founded depicting the idea of traveling to Bali, but they changed the name. I think it was actually Une Nuit Bali or something like that. And they changed the name to be a little bit more universal, featuring fragrances from all around the world. Again, super cool. I love the concept. I love how simple and direct it is. And that's the power of a good branding, of good marketing. I'll be reading the back of the discovery set because it gives some ideas about the brand. It gives a little bit of a brief about the brand, and it might just get us to be a little bit more in tune with the fragrances. So here it says, we created Une Nuit Nomade to elegantly awaken your desire to roam from continent to continent in search of the fascinating and breathtaking destinations. Une Nuit Nomade is an invitation to the motionless journey where each inch of your skin becomes a new frontier, meant to reveal a new fragrance, a new emotion. The art of travel is to imagine other lands, to step into the unknown, to leave your homeland in order to return enriched by an invaluable experience. Becoming an olfactory wanderer means sailing towards a new world where old habits are left behind. It means changing perfumes like you change scenery. It means exploring the chemistry of the unattainable and being playful with the invisible. It's adopting a philosophy of life, a sense of curiosity, a desire to take on another form and become floral, oriental, citrus, woody, an adventure, or a romantic. This was a mouthful. Again, it's a long and convoluted way to really depict a simple concept. Basically, they're showcasing fragrances from all around the world, and they're meant to be incredibly transportative, incredibly evocative. So I'm expecting a lot of that. And if these fragrances fall short on the narration aspect, I'll be kind of disappointed because that's their whole selling point. Anyway, as we go into the discovery set, as I said before, we have the 8 fragrances. On the back, we actually have the ingredients, which we're not going to cover today. And then we have these cards here. The cards are actually one for each fragrance, and they have a little bit of a description of the fragrance, and I'm going to be reading that description also. I really want to give the brand all the chances to really have me enveloped, to really have me captured, and to really have me just transported to this location. I'm assuming that these cards are ordered in the same way that the fragrances are presented. By the way, the whole presentation of this box is absolutely amazing. It's the little things that make a huge difference. It's the fact that all of the samples are oriented with the name towards you. It's just the little touches that really make you think that the brand cares about their presentation, cares about their marketing. And again, it might sound silly, it might sound trivial, but this is a discovery set. This is meant to showcase a brand. And when a brand really puts effort in it, they put effort in the order of the fragrances to be showcased, they put effort in the whole presentation, it really makes a difference. It really leaves a lasting impression. So as I said, we're going to be tackling the discovery set starting from Sugar Leather. Also, as I mentioned before, this is the only fragrance from Une Nuit Nomade that I ever sampled. To be completely honest, I will be putting on my third-person hat, but I don't really remember what this thing smells like. I do kind of remember it being very sweet, very mass appealing, very likable, but other than that, I don't really remember the scent profile. Anyway, the card features a desert with camels, really interesting. Sugar leather, it gives me the idea of a very warm, leathery, very enveloping sort of smell. Again, sugar, maybe mass appealing, a little bit gourmand. Behind the card, we have a little bit of a description. As I said before, we also have the notes. I'm going to be going through the whole card just because I feel it's an added bonus. It's added information that will allow me to really kind of like project to that place, to be really transported to that place that is being showcased by the fragrance. But here we go. The description of Sugar Leather reads, Our nomadic caravan stretches forth in silence. We move to the rhythm of camels in an almost hypnotic pendulum movement. The saddle of our host, heated by the arrogant sun, gives off the sweet and delicate scent of leather. We are approaching Al Khalouf. The landscape is almost lunar. The sand color has changed to a blinding white. On these sugar dunes, we become minuscule. Sugar leather is a piece of a leather covered in white sand and caramelized by the sun, a decadent, racy, spicy fragrance. All right, here we go. Sugar leather. These are the same samples of Les Indemodables. They seem really high quality, and I bet that the sprayer are good. Let's give it a couple sprays. Maybe 3, because the first one is kind of a fluke. I do kind of remember this, but anyway, third person mode. This is immediately very pleasant, very mass appealing. It's very, very likable. I actually think, or I seem to remember, that sugar leather is the most popular from the brand, and I can totally see why. This is a very likable scent profile. It's very sweet, but not super cloying, but it's definitely gourmand. The leather component is incredibly faint. It's barely detectable to my nose, at least. It gives it a little bit of a suede-ish feeling. This actually kind of reminds me of Baby Cat by Yves Saint Laurent, because it does combine a vanillic, very rich, very dense sweetness to this sort of a very refined, very subtle suede component. It's objectively very good. It's very beautiful. I think it's very well balanced, very well designed. It's not too surprising in any way. I think that it's fairly simplistic, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, these are scents that are meant to depict a very simple image. Caravan of camel through the desert. The sun is baking down. Not really getting much heat from this. For some reason, I do associate heat from the sun to sweat. And for example, when I talked about Jubilation 40 by Amouage, that really gave me a striking image of this guy riding his horse through the desert and sweating under this very rich, very opulent sort of garmentry. And this one here does not give me the same effect, at least off strip, that is. It comes across as fairly powdery, very, very delicate, has this distinct sweet note that kind of is a little bit artificial. It doesn't smell natural. You know how some spices and some woods sometimes smell very naturally sweet? This does not smell like that. This smells a little bit artificially sweet, like some sort of added sweetness. The vanillic aspect in here is present, but not overly so. This is not necessarily a vanilla fragrance. It's just very simply sweet. I like this a lot. It's fairly simple, very direct, but again, putting myself in the shoes of someone walking into a shop to sample the brand, taking notes of the first impression, taking notes of mental scores, this would fare pretty well. Maybe I'm past the scent profile. Maybe it's a little bit too simplistic for me, but it's still good. And I think that this deserves an easy 7 out of 10 just for the presentation alone. In the very first opening, it's very, very pleasant. The second fragrance that we're going to be sampling is Sun Bleached. This one here has a depiction on the card of a Middle Eastern town, maybe something from Uzbekistan or maybe from Oman, something like that. And actually it appears to be Muscat, because the description reads, Muscat, the capital of the Sultanate of Oman, also known as the White City. The sun drowns the immaculate walls with its rays. Its bright light makes the eye squint. Omanis wander the streets elegantly wearing their dishtashas, a long white tunic decorated with a pom-pom that is delicately dipped in perfume. Sun Bleached is adorned with freshness in an accord of clean linen, white flowers and a zesty flight of citrus as it's biting into a piece of an orange, with white musk and sandalwood rounding off its explosiveness. Very interesting. This was not what I was expecting from this concept, but nonetheless, let's give it the usual 2 good sprays. I think it's going to be 2.5 because we have to prime all of the atomizers. So let's see what we get from this. Much brighter than I was expecting. For whatever reason, the description got me thinking about very clean sheets, like a very musky, clean sort of a white floral, but this is actually fresh. It's very, very zesty. very citrusy. And it did talk about citrus, it did talk about blinding light, so I guess it makes sense. Very simple, once again, it feels like a simple concept, like a simple execution. And this again is not a bad thing. These are very easy to understand fragrances, and I do applaud this approach. One of my favorite houses ever is Les Indemodables. Those fragrances are actually also very simple and direct, very easy to grasp, even to a person that is not reading the descriptions, that is not reading the notes. They're fairly easy to relate to. And these ones here also give me the same sort of impression. Maybe they appear to be a little bit more mass appealing in nature, but again, it's not a bad thing. A brand like this is successful because it makes mass appealing scents that smell kind of different and unique. This smells good. I like it a lot. I mean, even the other one smelled really good. But this is so reassuringly simple. It's very beautifully citrusy, a little bit creamy on the bottom. It smells white. It smells fresh. It smells radiant. Interestingly enough, these fragrances do not come across as super powerful. Some of the other houses that I smelled, even Thomas de Monaco, but mainly like Tamine. The other one was what? Well, obviously Zerjov, but some other houses really came across as super powered. These are much milder and in the best way possible. They smell a little bit more natural. They don't smell injected with aroma chemicals meant to boost the projection. This is nice. Not my style of fragrance, I have to say. It's a little bit too simple. I already talked about this in other discovery sets, but when I smell scents like this, I immediately relate to like a very clean hotel room in the best way possible. This is very beautiful. I would say that walking into a shop smelling this, first impressions would be a little bit lower than Sugar Leather. That is much more iconic in a way. This smells like a lot of other beautiful French perfumer that I've smelled. Still good, probably something like a 6.5 out of 10, maybe leaning towards a 7, but still very, very good. The third fragrance that we're gonna be smelling is Jardins de Misfah. I seem to remember that this one is also quite popular. The card depicts this palm tree, sort of tropical looking jungle with waterfalls. There's also a red berried fruit of some sort. I'm not really sure what that is. We might get a clue from the notes. Anyway, the description reads, in the village of Misfah al-Brayin, the 1001 nights are at your fingertips. In the midst of flowery alleyways, the joyful laughter of water flowing from terrace to terrace and the palm trees as far as I can see, one cannot forget the words of Amin Malouf. A bite from the date not only contains flesh that nourishes your body, but the sweetness, scent, and color that nourishes your spirit. Jardins de Misfah is an olfactory pause, a moment suspended in time, a harmony of scents where the fresh whisper of flower petals fuses with an accord of creamy dates, honey, and sweet water. Okay, so I guess this red fruit here is actually a date. This sounds really interesting. I hope it lives up to the image. Let's see what this smells like. Let's get our trusty sample. Let's give it our 2.5 sprays. This was actually just 2, but I digress. This is an interesting scent. I definitely pick up on the fruitiness. It has a little bit of a honey molasses, very densely sweet fruit. It does kind of resemble dates, but this is the issue with reading descriptions and reading briefs. They kind of trick your brain into thinking that you're smelling something that you're actually not smelling. So, would I have the same impression on a blind smell? Who knows? Actually, let me rephrase this, because for fragrances like this, for brands like this that are meant to be very transportive and evocative, having a little bit of a description is a net positive. Having a little bit of a hand-holding experience can guide you through the fragrance, can guide you through the intentionality. A good description just elevates the idea of a product, like in the case of Meo Fushuni. It shouldn't be strictly necessary, but I feel that it is a little bit of an added value. And I really like how these are portrayed, how they're written, and how they're illustrated. So I think it's cool. It doesn't feel forced. Anyway, back to the scent profile, I do pick up on this fruitiness. It's the most prominent thing to me. It's a little bit of a weird scent because the fruitiness is easily contrasting with this metallic background in a way. It does smell a little bit green, but not in a very realistic greenness. The greenness in here has a little bit of a different hue. It's kind of going towards blue. It feels like one of those greens from the leaves of the agave plant. It's very cold, very metallic. Maybe this hue is meant to resemble the wateriness of the description, but I'm not really getting any wateriness. There's no typical cucumber note, there's no airiness to it. This date note, this fruity note is very much dominating the scent profile. In the backbone, again, it's this weird woody, metallic, kind of green sort of smell. It's interesting. It's probably the one I like the least. This without the description would come across as a little bit bizarre. It's a little bit of a bizarre contrast between the notes, between the smells. I still do think that overall though, despite the quirkiness of the scent, is still quite mass appealing. Again, the date sweetness is very, very apparent, and it feels, again, a little bit added sweetness. It feels like it was intentionally designed to be a little bit more likable. If the date fruit itself was not listed in the description, I doubt that this would have come across the same way. It probably would have come across as a little bit try-hard likable. It would have felt like this sweetness was injected into the fragrance to make the greenery, to make this metallic greenery a little bit more likable. It's cool. I would love to wear this, and I actually probably will wear all of these in the coming days to just form a better idea. But overall, opening alone, pretty solid, very interesting. I think that this is a solid 7 out of 10. Overall, I think that I have to bump up the score of Sugar Leather to 7.5, just because compared to these, it's a little bit more intuitive, it's a little bit more fun. I like that a little bit more. This one here though is a solid 7. I just realized that this is not 8 fragrances in the discovery set, it's actually 10 fragrances, so this might be a little bit of a longer video. Anyway, fragrance number 4 is Ambre Khandjar. It depicts once again Middle Eastern vibes, desert tents. There's a guy with a horse, so I'm expecting a little bit more warmth, something similar to the idea of Sugar Leather maybe. Anyway, the description reads, the souk of Mutra is found in the heart of the oldest city in Middle East, the capital of the Sultanate of Oman, Muscat. It's the perfect place to spend a small fortune for a legendary Khandjar. The Khandjar is a dagger bent in the shape of a J. Our fragrance, Ambre Khandjar, is a tribute to the power of tradition. It's a powerful oriental amber with modern facets and lingering of leather and vanilla that make it timeless, warm and addictive. A scent that is skin tanned by the sun and the cold of metal. All right, this seems fairly straightforward. Once again, it's another ambery vanillic fragrance, very enveloping, very mass appealing in concept. Let's see how this fares. Let's spray this on our trusty strip. Yeah, this is your typical amber fragrance. It's, again, very recognizable, very beautiful scent profile. It's very well balanced, but it's not too dissimilar from a lot of other stuff on the market. In a very first quick and dirty impression, this smells remarkably similar to stuff like Material by Amouage. It actually smells remarkably similar also to Grand Soir, maybe because it has a little bit of lavender, something cold in there, something fresh to just liven up the scent profile. Yeah, it's definitely beautiful, it's very well made, but it's not unique by any stretch of the imagination. I've smelled a ton of amber fragrances that smell very much like this. Again, it's simple, straightforward. If you've never smelled an amber fragrance, and especially if you're coming from the designer world, this will rock your socks off. Actually, I smelled a lot of amber fragrances recently, and the best one that I smelled was Amber Aquilaria by Electimos. That one there had the same sort of backbone, but it had that oud component that which really made it super interesting and really made it stand out from the rest of the bunch. This one here is another one of those ambers. I'm not even a huge fan of ambers just because they lack so much originality. And amber, I feel, is an accord which is relatively cheap to make and relatively easy to make. So much so that it's a very much used base note for many fragrances. Yeah, this is not original whatsoever. It's a little bit boring to me. It's very likable, very mass appealing. It's objectively beautiful. It's just not as interesting as I hoped for. It smells like a little bit more edgy version of Grand Soir. I think that it smells remarkably similar again to Amouage Material. Not that interesting to me. Overall though, walking into a shop smelling this would leave a very good impression. It's powerful, it's beautiful, it's mass appealing. It just smells the part. But again, knowing what I know, knowing that a lot of amber fragrances smell just like this, I'm a little bit underwhelmed. I have to say that this is probably the worst of the bunch just because it's so unoriginal. I think that this is like a 6, maybe 6.5 out of 10, something like that. It's just a little bit boring to my taste. Fragrance number 5 appears to be an interesting one. It's called Love at First Sight. The image here depicts two silhouettes kind of meeting under these purple trees. I'm really curious to see what the description is all about. It reads, springtime is mild in Johannesburg. Jaraconda takes over the city with its mauve coat and sits majestically for a season. Its bell-shaped flowers sway in the wind, giving off a bewitching fragrance, a hymn to love. Eager acacias welcome this declaration with fluttering hearts and flushed cheeks. Love at first sight is an instant passion of flower scents mingling and intertwining. The intense caress of the freshness of Jaraconda succumbs to the honeyed kiss of acacia. I really like how these things are written. It's really nicely written. They're really nicely done. Really nice images. I really like the attention to detail of this brand. Anyway, this one here appears to be a flowery scent. Let's see what this is all about. Definitely flowery, but very, very different smelling. This is a completely different flowery scent from what I've smelled before. Maybe it's the specific sort of flower. Maybe it's something in the honeyed notes that they were talking about, but this smells a little bit skanky. It smells a little bit dirty. It smells very, very rich, like a furry petal. It kind of reminds me of the texture of jasmine, that very dense, furry sort of petal, without any of the scent profile of jasmine. This smells very, very different. It smells a little bit unripe. It smells a little bit green in a way. I can't even pinpoint the color. Again, my brain is a little bit biased by the mauve color, by the purple bluish color, but it doesn't smell like that. All I'm getting is this green, unripe, flowery skankiness, which combined with this sweet, honeyed sort of a nectar or maybe pollen sort of aspect makes for a very interesting scent. It's very dense, but at the same time, it's also light. I mean, it feels dense because the honey just brings everything down. It kind of reminds me of Raw Gold by Thomas de Monaco, but it's also fairly light and airy, maybe because of this green metallicness that is kind of giving it a little bit of zing, a little bit of edge. And without that, this would be a very, very heavy scent. There's also maybe a little bit of a musky component, really emphasizing this furry petal or this furry flower. I don't really get any romance aspect. I don't really get the name Love at First Sight unless they're referring to the skankiness of the maybe love consumption, maybe that pheromone sort of like cold sweat sort of thing. The passion, the adrenaline rush of seeing someone and just falling in love at first sight. Maybe it's referring to that, but I don't know. I'm not really into this. It's not really my scent. It's interesting for sure, but it's the one that I like the least from the bunch easily. If I were to smell this in a shop, I would be not very impressed. I would probably just gloss over this right away. It's also fairly faint compared to the other ones. I mean, the other ones have a strong sweet component that really boosts the projection and just smellability of the scent. This one here is fairly mild. The honey note is very much masked by all these musks. First impression wise, I think that this is the weakest of the bunch. I would give this a 6 out of 10. I also think that the scent profile for this would be very, very polarizing. You would either love it and it would trigger you, bring you to a time and a place, or it would be completely nondescript and super generic. Interesting, but still a 6 out of 10 for me. Fragrance number 6 is Suma Oriental. I really like the image on here. Basically, it's like a red moon reflecting on the sea. There's some tropical vegetation. It seems really evocative, really peaceful. The description reads, Suma Oriental refers to the brilliant collection of writings by Tomé Pires, a Portuguese apothecary in the 16th century. It's a very detailed description of an insular Southeast Asia. Suma Oriental revealed for the first time that sandalwood originated in the Zumba, modern-day Indonesia. His work inspired renowned perfumer Coty to create a 1934 fragrance, Asuma, which evoked the moonlit beaches of Bali. Suma Oriental is a mesmerizing scent that enhances patchouli in a lush agreement with wooden and creamy notes. Alright, I like the imagery, I like the writing once again. Very, very poetic, very transportive. Let's see if the scent lives up. So this was supposed to be sandalwood and patchouli or something like that? For whatever reason, this kind of reminds me of a fragrance by Les Indémodables. I can't really pinpoint it. Maybe it's the Patchouli and Mosette. It has some earthiness, but it's very, very creamy, very polite, very elegant. It's very well done. It's a little bit, again, mass appealing, a little bit too simplistic in my opinion. It's just definitely not my scent. I like patchouli, but I like the earthy, moldy, musty aspect of patchouli. This one here is basically devoid of all those aspects. It's super creamy. It's a little bit chocolatey. It's a little bit nutty. It's very beautiful, but it has a definite thinness to it. I don't know why. It just comes across as very bland in my opinion. It also has probably some sort of an amber base, because again, it comes across as a little bit artificially sweetened in a way, just to make it more mass appealing. It's not bad, it's beautiful, but this is probably the closest one to like a designer that I smelled from the brand. It's a little bit, I don't know, just simplistic. And I don't mean it in a bad way, it's just really boring to me. And I don't know, just wearing this, and I will be wearing the sample just to give it a chance, but wearing this is a very difficult decision for me because I have to prioritize scents. And this one here is not something that I would be excited to wear. It's not something that I'm gravitating towards. This has a little bit of an ambery, vanillic chocolatiness that kind of reminds me also a little bit of the deepest of dry down of something like Vanilla by Les Indémodables, and that is a beautiful scent. But again, if the opening of a scent just reminds me of the deepest of dry down of another, where the scent is the most smooth and the most unremarkable, it's a little bit underwhelming. I don't know, it's just so simplistic, so basic. And I do get it. I get why people like this. I get why people could like this. It's just very unoffensive, very mass appealing, but it lacks all kind of spark. It just lacks personality. The other one that I smelled, Love at First Sight, wasn't really connecting with me, but at least it had a very specific image. This is so bland, and I don't know. I really don't like this. I think that this is a 5.5 out of 10. Yeah, this is the least interesting to me by far. A lot of these scents, unfortunately, are kind of confirming my impressions or thoughts on the brand. It's a fairly simplistic brand, which is meant to be mass appealing, very easy to like. And again, I'm not knocking the brand for this. I do appreciate brands that know what they are and that know who they're tailing to or that know who they're talking to. In this case, I do like the storytelling, I do like the narration, but the scent profiles themselves are very, very bland in a sense. They don't really smell like niche perfumery. They don't really smell artistic. I totally get the idea. I really like the concept, but I do feel that a lot of the appeal of the brand is heavily relying on the marketing. And they do a terrific job on this, and I have to applaud them because the descriptions are amazing, the images are amazing, everything about the box is amazing. I really can't fault that aspect, but I do feel that the scents, if to be smelled in a vacuum, they would be very unremarkable and they would have an incredibly hard time emerging from the mass of similar smelling scents. But back to sampling, fragrance number 7 is Memory Motel. This one here seems very, very interesting. The image showcases a person with an old school car, possibly in front of a motel. And the description of this one here reads, Andy Warhol found himself under Montauk's spell while in search of a hiatus from life. He rented his mansion in the summer of '75 to the Rolling Stones, who were rehearsing for their pre-recording of what would be their greatest album, Black and Blue, which included the melancholy ballad Memory Motel. This eponymous perfume is our burning tribute to those restless, turbulent times. An androgynous perfume with notes of tobacco wrapped in patchouli leaves, pierced with a touch of vanilla. All right, the description is super interesting. I really like the story. I'm very curious what this smells like. So, I don't know what I was expecting. This one here comes across as very, very light. I don't know, they were talking about tobacco, they were talking about patchouli and vanilla. I was expecting something deep and dense and rich. Again, those are the notes that are in Vanilla, and that's a very rich scent. This comes across as very light and airy. For whatever reason, it kind of reminds me of Etat Libre d'Orange Clean Suede. It has that sort of a airy feeling about it while still retaining the dense notes. Very interesting. I can't really connect it to anything. Again, the narrative behind the scent is super abstract, not something that I can easily relate to. Maybe it's supposed to smell like the 70s, but I don't know, I can't really picture anything. Anyway, the main note that is in here is definitely the tobacco. The tobacco in here is very much a likable, smooth tobacco. Nothing like Royal Tobacco by Amouage, nothing like Café Tabac by Aires de Venustas. This is a very smooth, hayish tobacco, but something in here is giving this a little bit of an ashtray smell, a little bit of an ashy smell, and not in an offensive way whatsoever. It's just beautifully balancing the tobacco with this very dry, a little bit bitter, a little bit sour sort of smell. This is very, very light, very subtle. It smells a little bit powdery in a way. It's very, very likable. For whatever reason, it's also kind of reminding me of Amouage Decision that I smelled recently. The vanilla note mainly. It has a little bit of a synthetic airiness about it, still retaining a lot of sweetness. This is easily the least sweet of the bunch. I can't stress enough how torn I am about this, because on one side I do feel that it's the best of the bunch because it's the most abstract, the most creative, the most cryptic and mysterious one, but it's also super synthetic smelling. The more I smell this, the more I'm reminded of Amouage Decision, and not in a good way. I don't know, I'm kind of feeling that I want to test this on skin, but I'm also scared to be incredibly let down. So again, I'm not really sure what to think. On strip, first impression wise, third person mode, walking into a shop, smelling stuff, and thinking about the brand, this would not be too impressive because it doesn't really transport me anywhere. It's not really an homage to travel, not as directly as the other ones were. This is a little bit more cryptic, but it smells interesting. I think I have to give this like a 7 out of 10. It's really, really cool. I'll be definitely wearing this, maybe even tonight. Something that's really annoying about this discovery set is that it's incredibly hard to pull out the samples. I know it's a minor complaint. The presentation overall is amazing, but again, it's a little bit of a faff. Anyway, next fragrance is Nothing But Sea and Sky. The imagery here appears to be, I'm not really sure what it appears to be, because it could pass as snow, but it's probably more like a beach or like a beach town with some sort of a ladder going down to the beach, but it's desaturated in such a weird way that it almost looks like snow. Anyway, the description reads, in his celebrated poetry collection, Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman wrote from Montauk Point, where his contemplation led to this quote, nothing but sea and sky. At Montauk Point, also called The End, the world stops during winter. The sky is veiled in pale white and the breeze of blizzard sprinkles the beach with snowflakes. The rough sea gives the impression of large cotton fields in bloom. Nothing But Sea and Sky is a tribute to Montauk under its coat of snow. It's a reassuring fragrance, a stole of white musk infused with sandalwood with milky notes. So I was right, this is snow. It's super cool. I really like the imagery. I really like the write-ups. They're so beautifully done. They're so thoughtfully done. They're so intelligent. I really, really like this stuff. Unfortunately, again, the fragrances are a little bit of a letdown, but hey, maybe this one here will impress me. This is easily the softest from the bunch. This is almost completely absent. It's almost like a trick. Like, are you even smelling something? It's basically a pure musk scent. It has nothing standing out predominantly. It's very, very simple. It almost smells like something from Dies and Durga. I would see this scent from their line. It has this very edgy and apologetic nothingness to it. Very, very artistic. Look, this is totally not my scent profile, but for whatever reason, I do like bold moves like this. Making a fragrance that smells like this, that is called like that has that description, is a ballsy sort of move. And this is cool. I like the idea. I like the fact that it's so super subtle that it's barely detectable. This smells kind of like a beautiful clean towel, but actually it doesn't even get to that towel. This is like a cotton fog that is being compressed before turning into a towel. And I know it doesn't work like that, but this is the kind of image that I'm getting. It smells incredibly light. This would be an amazing skin scent, like one of those scents that you spray on to make your skin just better. You would probably smell super clean, super refined when wearing this. This would go really well on white, like on a white shirt, on a white linen. It smells really, really interesting. Again, it's super subtle, really, really simple, really linear, and not multifaceted at all. It's super thin, very one-dimensional. But again, somehow I really appreciate the ballsiness of this scent. It's super bold in concept. I have to say though, as much as I like the idea, as much as I like the execution, because that is my edginess, that is the edgy part of my brain coming into action, I really have to say that third person mode, walking into a shop smelling this, I would give this like a 0 because it basically smells like nothing. I would not be impressed whatsoever. If you get one of those fragrances from Clean, the brand, it smells basically like this, but even more intense. This as a fragrance would be incredibly underwhelming. I would feel that this is more like an art piece. Yes, you could probably use it, spray a ton of it on, but without any expectations. This doesn't smell like much. I don't know, I'm just really mesmerized by the boldness of the message, by the ballsiness of the scent. And I wasn't expecting something like this from Une Nuit Nomade. It's such a stark contrast with Ambre Khandjar or whatever that was. That was like pure mass appealingness. This is like pure niche, pure artistic identity. I really applaud the brand for being so ballsy and for putting this into the discovery set. Wow. Again, unfortunately, first impressions, sampling on strip, this is like a 4, if not a 3. It's super underwhelming. If nothing and no one is there to explain what this is, you would be completely underwhelmed. And for whatever reason though, in a hilarious manner, I really feel like spraying this on skin, although I'm pretty sure I will keep getting a lot of nothingness. Second to last fragrance is Bohemian Soul. The image here is a beach with a surfboard, a campfire, and a little bit of a picnic basket. Really interesting. Let's see what the description says. In 1966, the documentary Endless Summer was released, chronicling two American surfers' quest to push time zones further away so that the summer never ends. Free spirits from the Gypsy trends are pursuing this dream, and Montauk became their preferred destination, an isolated place from the world where untouched nature and eco-luxury connect. Bohemian Soul reflects this journey with elegance and modernity, an immediate freshness like a gentle wind rising up over the ocean, giving way to iris and Gaiac wood before a flourishing of sandalwood and delicacy of musk and twine. All right, I feel that these last three all depict a very specific place in a much more artistic vision. I really like this stuff. It kind of feels like description for fragrances from imaginary authors or something like that. They're very artistic, they're very poetic in a way, very thoughtful. I really like these descriptions. The last two scents, the one with the tobacco and actually the one with the nothingness, were probably my favorite because of the artistic intent, because of the concept and idea. I wonder what this one here smells like. This is very fresh, very limey. Lime is easily the fruit that I'm picking up. It has a special green, sweet tinge to it. Very, very fresh, very light, very airy. Again, the last three scents that I smelled, the tobacco one, the snow sea one, and this one here are all incredibly subtle. This is like a creamy liminess. I'm not really sure what I'm smelling. It kind of reminds me of the second one. What was that? Sun Bleached, the one that smelled very citrusy and very bright, but in a much more subtle way. Am I being tricked by the clever branding and marketing again? If I were to smell this in a vacuum, I would probably be like, what the hell is this? It smells like nothing, but not nothing in a cool way like before. This smells so faint, like a faint citrus with this sort of a creamy undertone. But again, it's so incredibly delicate. I get it. I get the artistic intent, I get the artistic vision, but featuring more than one of these scents in a discovery set is a little bit testing your audience, it's a little bit testing your clientele. This is more offensive than the other one. The other one is kind of like tongue-in-cheek humor. It's a little bit funny in a way. This is not that funny. It smells very, very light. That citrusy zing that was there at the beginning, that liminess, is basically gone. It's incredibly fleeting. It's leaving behind this woody, synthetic note, not too dissimilar from something like Akigala wood. It smells empty. It smells super light. It smells almost like transparent. I remember this video that I saw on YouTube, I think by Nile Red. If you know the channel, kudos to you. He tried to make transparent wood, and this smells like that. It smells like a transparent sheet of wood, like almost like paper thin. Very, very unusual. I'm actually curious to look at the notes for this. Top notes appear to be Artemisia, Absinthium, Olibanum. Heart notes appear to be Guaiac, iris, and myrrh. And base notes, sandalwood and musk. So there is not even liminess in there. The citrus notes, I guess, were given by that Artemisia, that greenness, that green herbaceousness. But again, I can barely smell anything off this strip, and I don't find it necessarily fun. The other one was cool, clever. This one here is really not my style. So putting myself into the person walking into a shop, smelling this, evaluating the opening, considering a purchase, this would score incredibly low. This is almost like an insult to the customer, in my opinion. Maybe I'm missing something. If you know something more about this, leave it down in the comments. I'm super curious, but this is easily the worst opening so far. It's probably like a 2 out of 10. On to the last fragrance from the discovery set. I wonder what this one here will be. This one here is Click Song. The image showcases some sort of a singer, maybe with an African hat or some sort of a Middle Eastern sort of a hat, singing in front of a crowd. Really cryptic once again. I don't know where this is going. It might just all come around. It might be all part of the narrative. It might be an incredibly intelligently put together discovery set. But anyway, let's see what the description is all about. It says, Click Song, Congo Twane in Xhosa language, was brought to the world by the great Miriam Makeba, a star singer in South Africa, a child of the townships who had an unimaginable destiny. She was forced to wear the wings of exile due to her strong stance against apartheid. She traveled the world, making her fight known. She is considered the mother of Africa. Click Song is a burning tribute to this extraordinary woman, a rosebud draped in patchouli leaf, whose solid and deep roots of an amber and labdanum sink into the sacred ground of its origins. Alright, so the click song actually ignored the fact that it was actually a click song, like the African clicking sound. Very, very interesting concept, very abstract, very difficult to depict in a fragrance. I wonder what this is all about. It appears to be a rose patchouli fragrance, maybe? Let's see. Okay, we're definitely back into normal fragrance realm, back into those fragrances that Une Nuit Nomade does best. Very simple, very easy to like, very mass appealing scents. This, as I suspected, is a rose patchouli scent with a little bit of a twist, with a little bit of a mass appealing sort of twist. Surprise, surprise, there's a lot of amber in the base, which is kind of flooding over into the top notes, just blanketing everything. It's rosy, it's not obviously rosy, it's not super floral in any way. The rose in here is very powdery, very dry. It almost feels literally like a dried rose. And this ambery sweetness is still that kind of sweetness that feels a little bit artificial, that, as I said before, is kind of blanketing everything, making everything a lot more subtle and a lot more difficult to decipher. As the scent is drying down off the strip, that rose that was a little bit more prominent in the opening is fading off very, very quickly, and it's leaving behind this patchouli amber thing. Again, super likable, very, very mass appealing, a little bit simplistic to my taste. It's a little bit nondescript. The art and the concept behind this is impressive. I like it. It's beautifully written up as usual. The art style, the image on the card is really cool. I just like the concept as a whole, but I can't relate the two things. This one here doesn't really transport me anywhere. It's not about the travel. I can't relate to this image unless you know this person, unless you've been following this character. you'll have an incredibly hard time really understanding what this is about. I get no clickiness, no sharpness, no character, no decisiveness. In my head, the click song, the click language is very specific, and this one here is actually quite the opposite. It's very, very smooth. And this ambery aspect is the same amber stuff that was in the Ambre Khandjar. It's the same nondescript, kind of boring, simplistic amber. And yes, there's some patchouli, yes, there's some floral, but it's really simple. Not a fan whatsoever. And as the scent is drying down and getting more and more ambers, it could have been a lot better. Once again, keeping in mind the idea of going into a shop to smell these fragrances, keeping in mind the idea of a potential purchase, this one here would also appear kind of underwhelming. I get it, the art is cool, the idea is cool, the translation into fragrance form, not so much. It's a little bit boring, it's a little bit underwhelming. I do feel that these fragrances needed to be a little bit more exciting. They needed a tiny bit more sharpness, a little bit more edge, a little bit more character to really come alive. They're just so castrated by this blanket of like artificial sweetness. Most of them actually are. And surprisingly, the only fragrance from the bunch that I kind of justify being this sweet and mass appealing is actually Sugar Leather. Maybe it's because it's the first one that I smelled, so I was still fresh. Maybe it's because it's the only one that was actually referencing the sugar notes in the description, making it a little bit more direct, maybe a little bit more simple, but simply beautiful in a way. It was very well done. This one here comes across as a little bit try hard, a little bit reaching in terms of imagery. This is a good scent, don't get me wrong. It's a smooth, likable scent, but it's a little bit pretentious in what it is. It's pretentious in the way they attach this concept to this fragrance. It actually really reminds me of the fragrance that I smelled recently in a first impression comparison video that I did not like, which was Hypnotizing Fire. Again, very mass appealing, very beautiful, very likable, but so bland and thin, especially for how much it's hyped up by the brand, by the marketing, by the price. And by the way, I'm not really sure how much these fragrances retail for. I seem to remember that these are fairly well priced. The Discovery set itself is incredibly well priced, so I do still think that it's super worth the price, but this set specifically just doesn't really connect with me. It's a little bit too simplistic. So going back to the rating, walking into a store, thinking about a potential purchase, if it were me, I would probably give this like a 6 out of 10. Maybe for the average person that is in search of more simple, beautiful, mass appealing scents, this could range up to a 7. But it's not that interesting. So overall, what do I think about the set? Which one will I be spraying on skin? To be completely honest, I started off this journey, this experiment, expecting very simplistic scents, which I kind of found. Sugar Leather to me is the best representation of my expectations that I had for the brand. Very direct, very simple, very beautiful. It's the one that actually got the highest score on my first impression rating. But I will not be spraying that on skin just because I know, well, first of all, I know what it smells like. Second of all, it's simple, it's likable. It's not really that surprising as a scent. It's not really my thing. And as I was sampling these samples on camera with you, I was kind of thinking in the back of my head which one I would end up spraying on skin. And I was kind of torn on two. One of them was Memory Motel, the other one was Nothing But Sea and Sky. And I actually decided to go the weird one, Nothing But Sea and Sky. And just to remind you, this is basically a fragrance that ended up smelling like nothing, like a very, very thin, subtle musk, kind of like a cotton cloud. And I'm not expecting much of a transition on skin. I'm not deciding on wearing this because I'm expecting some sort of evolution, nothing like that. I decided to wear this because this is actually a fragrance that I like the artistic intent most out of the set. And it really, I don't know, although serious, I just found it super hilarious how extremely subtle this is, how hilariously subtle this is. I just found it kind of just funny and hilarious, almost like a joke. And I want to give it a try just because, well, it's meant to be a fragrance apparently, and I just want to see how it fares on skin. So let's give it a couple sprays, maybe even 3, and let me just recap the whole Discovery set in general. So Une Nuit Nomade is definitely not for me, as far as I can tell. I kind of knew this from the start. I was never really interested in the brand. I never really gravitated towards the brand because I suspected that it would probably be something like this. It would probably be a very simplistic sort of concept. I wasn't expecting such a deep, thoughtful, and intelligent marketing, so I am surprised by that. I'm very positively surprised by that. But overall, the scent profiles are, I don't know, they're a little bit of a mix, because the more likable ones are incredibly simple, incredibly basic. They're very one-dimensional, they're very one-directional, and they're likable. They're mass appealing, and I can see why they're popular. The other ones, the really artistic ones, are super weird. They're stuff like that I would expect Diez and Durga to come up with. They're really avant-garde, they're really thin, they're really subtle, and I don't know, maybe the subtleness is there to depict kind of like the memory aspect of these places and times. All of the subtle ones are kind of like based in the past, in the 70s, in a very specific area. Maybe it's a specific line that has that flavor, but overall they're incredibly strange. And overall, although I do appreciate the boldness and the ballsiness of something like Nothing But Sea and Sky, which I'm wearing, I just couldn't bring myself to purchase something like this, because they're not bold enough to be statement pieces. They're not bold enough like the Toscovas that I own and love, because those are insanely bold and kind of like unwearable. This is just like the weird in between, super artistic but overly, I don't know, it's just so subtle and so basic. They're not, the scents themselves lack a lot of intelligence. They lack the intelligence of the marketing. Anyway, I digress. Let's smell the thing on skin and let's draw the conclusions. So actually on skin it's way more present than it was on strip. On strip it was basically disappearing with the paper. It smelled kind of like paper. It smelled like a very faint cotton cloud. On skin, don't get me wrong, it's still incredibly faint, incredibly light, but I can detect a little bit more nuances in here. There is a distinct, very faint citrusy note in there, very delicate, very creamy. There's obviously this massive, well, massive compared to the rest of the notes, muskiness. It's basically a musk scent, but there's also a little bit of woodiness, very, very slight. And again, I'm trying to connect back to that image of this coast with the snow. And it does really represent whiteness. It does represent nothing but sea and sky. And it has this calming, like slow moving effect. I can't really understand how this is tailored to that story. It's tailored to this imagery, and I do respect that. I actually like this now. I like it on skin. It's very white. It almost had, it's like an off-white. It has a very slight off-white color that you look at it, and at a first glance it's just white. But then the more you look at it and the more you compare it to other whites, and the more you start feeling and perceiving some hint of color, some nuance in there. This is very subtle, very, very delicate. I do like the imagery. Again, I'm a huge fan of the marketing, the branding, exceptionally done. This one matches that. I don't find it offensive. I would never buy it, but I would never find it offensive. It's cool. Again, the brand as a whole, terrific packaging, terrific discovery set. I think I paid 50-ish bucks for this. Excellent sprayers, a lot of fragrances, 10 fragrances, a lot of juice, mini sprays, super marketing, super branding. This would be an excellent, fun experience to share with friends, maybe after dinner, in an evening, just going around and smelling these scents and learning about the brand. Highly, highly recommended just in that regard. Will I be purchasing any of these? Probably not. They're really not my thing. I've never been so detached from a discovery set. This is a brand that I respect. I respect their identity. I respect how clearly directional they are. They're just not for me. And a lot of the other weird brands that I've sampled, like Tamine, there were some fragrances that I liked. There were some fragrances that really worked for me. The other ones were super mass appealing. And those are actually brands that I respect less because they're kind of all over the place. Even Electimos, they started out super great and they ended up a little bit generic and mass appealing in a weird way. This is cool. I like this brand. I like it and I respect it. It's just not for me. But hey, we move on. I appreciate what there is to appreciate. I take what I like and just move on to the next thing. Keep your nose out there, keep your mind open, just keep experimenting, even things that are not necessarily into your preferred scent profile, there's always something to learn. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Many more speed dating episodes to come. I have a ton of discovery sets to go through. As per usual, see you in the next one and cheers.